Welcome to our community development meeting. It is January 26, 2023. The time is 10 a.m. Calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, and my only opening remarks would be, and it's a pretty light crowd, that if you tend to agree with what somebody's saying, you can do sign language or just agree with putting your hand in the air. That way we can get through this meeting fairly quickly, and I will poll for conflicts of interest. None? Okay.
No conflict.
None. All right, so we are to our deliberation item, and this is now a spectator sport. The participatory sport was a couple weeks ago. So this is item number 1, CUP 22-0004, and this is a reconsideration of the AT&T wireless communication facility. And I don't know, do we need, maybe Pat, did you want to guide us in a particular way today as far as remind us what we're considering here? Because the reconsideration is a little bit different than our normal hearing.
Right, yeah. Can people hear me in the back? Okay. I'm gonna go right to the statute so that there's no.
And while you're looking that up, Pat, I will just remind everybody that we have the choice to affirm the original decision, reverse the original decision, therefore agreeing with the reconsideration, and then we can remand back to the hearing examiner or community development for further proceedings.
That is correct. Under state law, reconsideration of a decision made by in this case, the county commissioners, excuse me, can be made on the basis of alleged failure to identify the nature of compliance or noncompliance with express approval standards, or for the alleged failure to explain compliance or noncompliance with relevant decision criteria. Either of those are grounds for invalidation of an approved permit or site-specific authorization or denial of the same on appeal.
All right. Thank you very much. So do either of my co-commissioners need to hear from staff, or are we ready to start? Okay. Either one of you want to go first?
No.
Okay. Bruce?
I'll go first. After sitting down and listening to the information, I've come to the conclusion that the BOCC made a mistake in its initial decision. And I just want to cover some broad strokes of what was involved with that. And I put together a document that I want to put inside the record that details my thought process here. The first one was the availability of cell service. I did not believe that the applicant sufficiently proved that they were filling in gaps in cell service to a specified constituency. They provided maps that were computer generated. Those maps were projections. There was no supporting data to go with those maps. There was no way to understand the variables that were inputted into the computer software. And the one thing that they didn't do was provide real live data testing the strength of the radio frequency in various locations that they claimed did not have service. One of the challenges is that as more and more service is delivered throughout the country, the burden falls on the applicant to prove that there's gaps between that service. When you go back 30 years ago when this statute was passed, it was clear that there were large swaths of the country that did not have cellular service. And so it was much easier, a much lower threshold for the applicant to prove that service did not exist and that local jurisdictions must allow the permitting to provide this kind of service. So that's one of the areas. Another area is the impact to the community, the unintended consequences. While the appellant claimed that there was a fire risk by adding the cellular tower, I believe that there was a fire risk as it exists right now. And so the real question is whether or not there is an enhanced fire risk. And if there is, would that impact the surrounding homes from being able to get fire insurance? Would it increase their insurance so much that it could actually cause economic harm? And I believe that those questions were never examined. I do believe that the propensity for lightning strikes to cause fires is very high, especially in this part of the country. The question is, how much more could a tower increase the fire likelihood? And that was never really looked at to see how that could affect the surrounding community. So those are the two main areas where I thought the board made a mistake in not really taking into consideration the implications of allowing this cellular tower to be built there. As far as the health risks go, the board cannot, I don't see how I can look at that. That's defined by statute. Water scarcity to fight fires, there's already a fire issue there. There's already scarcity there. So I didn't look at that. The setbacks, from my understanding, those have to do with the structures and not the fencing. So I didn't see that as a significant issue. And so I recommend that the BOCC reverse its original decision, and that if the applicant can satisfactorily show that there are gaps with real live data and service, and that there's a constituency. And that's one of the other things, too, is that no one came forward saying that they could not get service, that there was actually an affected group. And so that's my conclusion.
Okay. Bill?
I did quite a bit of research. I went, called the University of Illinois, where I went to school, engineering department, which is reputed to be one of the best engineering departments in the country, and asked about the increased likelihood of lightning strikes in the area because of a cell tower, and they said there is none. I also asked about health risks, any reputable study that they have seen or done or knew about, and they said there are none. On the other hand, if it could be shown that cell service was in fact injurious to people's health, then it would be appropriate to take down all cell towers in Kootenai County, because we certainly don't want to put anybody's health at risk, but I don't think that's the case. And I don't think anybody's suggesting that. Everything else I heard during both hearings was anecdotal, and I don't make decisions based on anecdotes. So I would vote to affirm the first choice that we made, that is to permit the cell tower.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I did vote to deny it in the first place, and it was based on I didn't feel like they sufficiently provided enough information to say that there is a gap in coverage. And I think Commissioner Matari covered most of my other points. And so to not belabor this too much, I would agree with Commissioner Matari, and I would accept a motion at this point to agree with the reconsideration and reverse the original decision.
Just a point of clarification, Pat Braden, Civil Deputy Prosecutor for the record. Would that be to, with the reversal of the initial decision, would the subsequent decision be a denial? Or would it be a remand?
Denial.
Okay.
Unless, my co-commissioners agree on something else. So.
I'll make a motion I make a motion that we reverse the decision for CUP 22-0004. That was for the reconsideration of the AT&T WCF, and make it a denial.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Nay.
Commissioner Matari,
Aye.
Chairman Duncan.
Aye. All right, so the CUP 22-004 has been denied. All right, our next item of business is consideration of reinstating Bedrock Commercial Subdivision MSP 19-0003. And is that Director Callahan?
Yes, Madam Chair, good morning, everyone. This is one of those cases where the code is silent, meaning it doesn't talk about any options to reinstate subdivisions that have been approved. Thank you, John. Hopefully my voice carries enough that you won't really need that, but back to the point, this particular subdivision has been expired for a little over a year, but the staff's reviewed it. There have been no changed conditions since it was approved. Again, the code doesn't give me the authority to reinstate these things, but we've discussed these kinds of things before in a previous board, and you've agreed that we could go ahead and go forward under these kinds of circumstances. So that's this situation. I'm just asking if you're comfortable with allowing us to reinstate this subdivision, and we'll go forward with it as a final, instead of starting all over again and going through preliminary and then final.
In my opinion, the circumstances of the last few years, I think we should give people the absolute benefit of the doubt and not make them jump through any more hoops than they already have. So I would be in agreement with that. Bill?
Is there any indication that they want to move forward with this?
Yes, Vlad
okay.
knows all about this case.
Okay, but
I'll turn it over
if
to
there
you.
are, then I think we should let them. How's that?
Your microphone.
Push your button.
Good morning. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. As Director Callahan had stated, that there is interest in moving forward with the final plat application on this major subdivision application. Unfortunately, there have been some ongoing discussions with one of the agencies to address their requirements that have not been resolved at this point. That for that reason, they haven't been able to move forward, specifically access and improvements to a public road adjacent to the subject property. I did speak with the engineer of record. They advised me that nothing has changed. We do believe that it's really of no importance or need for them to go through the same hoops once again and to receive the same comments. There have been some minor changes, or not minor, there have been some changes to the existing property. It was originally a mining pit. It appears that a majority of the property has been reclaimed through Idaho Department of Lands, but it appears the remaining facts of the case are the same. I believe, Director Callahan, the most recent project that was reinstated, the board approved it for additional 2 years from the board's decision. So if you decide to reinstate it, it would be for additional 2 years with your approval.
What highway district?
This is Post Falls Highway District. The project is located off of Beck Road and Bedrock Road. It's to the west of the State Line Speedway.
All right, questions?
Are the road improvements required in order for them to start this project or finish it?
Correct. So this project has a unique set of circumstances. As I recall, Bedrock Road is located within a public right-of-way, but it's privately maintained. There is a need for dedication of additional right-of-way to make the necessary improvements to meet highway district standards. And that has been an ongoing discussion because there are multiple parcels that front that property. To date, I don't know if that's been resolved. I know that there's an extensive road development agreement that was put together by the highway district. Whether or not those requirements are in the process of being met or have been met is unknown. And that's sort of the key unknown factor of whether or not the accessibility can come to fruition.
But that's kind of separate than what we're doing here. I mean, they can't go forward until they fix that, but they can't go forward until we tell them that they're extended, so.
That's one of the reasons why this is one of the reasons why the project has expired
Gotcha.
and why it's before you today is because of accessibility issues.
Okay.
And the agencies will be contacted during the final subdivision process for compliance with the conditions of approval, and so that will all be taken care of. Either it'll be built or bonded for before we'll let them record the plat.
Thank you.
And then just one other question, because this started prior to my tenure here, but I trust that impact fees, that this subdevelopment would be subject to that.
There are no impact fees associated with this particular project. In fact, a majority of land development planning process does not have impact fees, with the exception of City of Hayden Lake.
He's talking about the
Hidden
new
Lake.
fire district.
Yeah,
Fire
they
district,
would be
yes.
applied at the building permit stage.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
okay.
So they're more with the building permits, not the
Right.
plat itself.
Right.
And then if Kootenai County has their process in the next 2 years, then they'd be subject to Kootenai County impact fees as well.
Right. But it would be subject to the fire and EMS impact fees, for KCFR and KCMSS, when they apply for building permit.
Okay. Those are my
Possibly
questions.
ours, depending on the timing.
All right, any other thoughts? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we reinstate the Bedrock Commercial Subdivision, MSP 19-0003.
Can I
I
add,
second it.
sorry, expiring in 2 years.
From today's.
Expiring in 2 years.
Unless
They timely apply for another extension and it's approved.
That too.
Everybody all done?
I think so.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Matari,
Aye.
Chair Duncan,
Aye. All right.
Thank you,
Extended.
Commissioners.
Yes. Item 2, wording clarification of purpose of Bulletin 77. And this is our Chief Building Official, Christina.
Morning. Chris Garland.
You got music as an intro, how's
Yes,
it?
Yes. Okay.
Chris Garland, Community Development Chief Building Official. We have, or the county has approved Bulletin 77 back in 2017. Let me give you just all your information.
While she's handing out, it may be helpful for Commissioner Matari to know, we have many bulletins like this that date back decades from directors from time immemorial, all for the purpose of outlining for staff procedural ways to deal with things that are not abundantly clear in the code. And so that sets things out once and for all, at least for the staff for the time being. Here we have a case where we thought we made some good improvement when this bulletin was written, but it's been 5 years. We've learned from doing, and so Christina wants to brief you on some ideas of changing this bulletin.
Okay, thank you.
So the intent of this bulletin was to help aging family members back in 2017. So instead of creating a two-family dwelling, we created a single-family dwelling so the person can take care of an aging family member. As to this date, some applicants have circumvented the system and have been utilizing the items in the back. They were selected as choosing 1, 2, or 3. If they met any one of those criterias, they can have a single-family dwelling that technically was a two-family dwelling. I think we've gotten away from actually using this secondary dwelling for a family member that is aging or maybe a caregiver. So I just kind of want to explain to you some of the plans that I gave to you. The yellow indicates the primary entryway, which they are supposed to be utilizing. They must enter the primary dwelling, go through the primary dwelling and into the secondary dwelling without the use of a secondary entrance. The blue mark indicates there is a secondary entryway that people are including, so this way they can close off one door, and the people that are using the secondary dwelling, they don't have to pass through. And that's not what its intent was. So if you look at all of these, they will clearly show that there is a secondary entryway. There is one that you have, I believe it's the last one. It's a quite large house that overlooks Coeur d'Alene Lake, excuse me. The upper level is exactly the same size, same bedrooms, full kitchen, full bathroom as the lower main level. And they have access from the outer portion of the dwelling to access the upper level without the use of going into the primary dwelling. And I'm just trying to either rewrite this as you see in the in red on the Bulletin 77 to be able to either utilize these items or just get rid of it completely.
My mom lives with my sister in Nevada, and they have two separate entrances. Their garage is shared, and they can go to the backyard from their own places. But it's designed specifically for what you're talking about, family members, and they have a common door. And so I'm a big, proponent of as many exits as possible for dwellings.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's not really a concern. And this is new. So I would like to revisit this again after I've had time to think about it. But my initial first thoughts are, I want as many exits as people want to put in their homes, especially if you do have, elderly folks and stuff like that. And so I probably would not be in favor of shutting off separate entrances and exits. That's just my initial thought without in-depth consideration.
Well, and my other concern is that if we do have a aging family member, most of these houses, as you can see from the plans, they're all 2 levels. Mm-hmm. So either the elderly person or the member that needs assistance is usually downstairs. But we don't have that in some cases. They have to go because the secondary dwelling is above the garage, so they have to utilize stairs. And usually the secondary dwelling is a lot smaller than the primary dwelling. So I'm still unsure what the permit holder's intent is. Are they utilizing it to rent it out, lease it out? Looking at this plan, it tells me this is going to be a rental at the top or the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where the owner's statement, which you reference at the very last paragraph of this proposed policy change, they provide a signed statement that they will only use that secondary dwelling for a member of a family as defined in the Land Use and Development Code, which is based on both federal and state law. So it does not they do not necessarily have to be blood relatives under that definition, but they do have to meet that definition. And if it's if somehow we're able to determine that it was being rented out to somebody outside of that definition of family, then that would be a code violation. My my only concern really is Panhandle Health on board with this policy, because, they normally base, septic capacity needs on bedrooms.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the entrance issue is going to be material to the determination of whether it's a single or double two-family dwelling.
Well, and I thought the Regional Coalition on Housing, or I can't remember the exact name of the group, was actually trying to pair non-related families together. When you have,
They are.
yes, so then we'd be enacting a law that goes directly against, or guidance or ordinance directly against what they're trying to do.
Well, that's why we're here. We wanted to hear from you. I think for Commissioner Matari's background, this originated when we first did it because people were coming to us and saying, why can't we have 2 kitchens in a household? And that way my brother can take care of my mother. And we said, well, we'll try and work it out through this approach. That worked okay for a while, but now we've had cases where people are basically almost assuredly using their home as a rental unit in a way it wasn't intended. So here we're just trying to clarify and move forward in a way that meets contemporary thinking.
Yeah, especially with the popularity of short-term rentals, that can certainly be an issue.
Right.
And my intent was not to remove any of the secondary
Options or-
exits, which is that the code states that you can have as many secondary exits as you need. You just have to have a primary egress for the house. And the way the wording was that everybody within that household, in order to go in and out, shall enter through there and shall exit through there, if you were to follow the Bulletin 77.
Okay, thoughts, Bill?
I think this is complicated, and it has to do with the changing geodynamic. We're changing. COVID has changed this, and the cost of housing has changed this. So we have to be very careful that we do this in a way that doesn't reduce housing. I know, I think Kiki Miller was one of the people that came before us. Who else was there? Do you remember?
Well, the entire Regional Housing Growth Issues Partnership
Well, they
is in concept behind what
Yeah.
Commissioner Duncan's.
you could tell they were very concerned, and this was a partial answer to the problem we have, where kids can't stay in Coeur d'Alene anymore once they leave the primary house. So I'm not prepared to make a decision today, but I think this is something that warrants some real thought, and maybe even a town hall where people can express themselves. Certainly invite people to contact the commissioners. And then you guys figure out how we do it.
Okay. It's always a process, that's fine.
Huh?
It's always a process. We're fine with that.
Yeah.
So do we want to revisit this in a month? Is that too long?
Sure, it was just mainly a discussion, just to get your insights of what my thinking was and how these have been submitted. So it was just informational at this point. So.
Yep. So, all right. Well, any further questions?
No, I think it's a complicated issue. I think that we should try to find a way to help people who want to help their aging relatives, for sure. That's a big deal nowadays. However, there's this cottage industry of investing in homes for the short rental markets and short-term rentals, and that creates problems for the surrounding community. And so we want to make sure that we address that. And the other thing, too, is the fact that you could build this home for a aging relative, and after 2 years, they're gone. And so then what happens with that space? And I would see where homeowners would say, well, I could rent this out, even if it's long-term. And is that something that,
Right.
we want to be thinking about as a consequence? But I agree, we should revisit it. I'd like to have a few weeks to,
Yeah, well, I know probably at least half a dozen kids who are under 25 right now living in a basement or a bedroom of a home, and so I don't want to prevent that.
Right.
And so that's, they're not related. They're just these kids renting a place because they don't have any other place to go. So renting a room. All right, I guess we'll be able to think about this and then revisit it.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, 10:30, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.